Before I open the hearing for the Barnstable Conservation Commission, I would like to ask Angela to do a roll call for the quorum purpose.
Thank you, Tom. Foster, did she sign on yet?
Yep, I see her. She's there
Okay.
without
Sound may be coming up.
no sound. Oh,
I'll swing it back. Hearn,
present.
Koshulik,
Present.
Lee,
Present.
Tangney, present. Sampu, he's coming on late.
You want to call Louise again?
Foster,
Present.
great, thank you,
There
Louise.
you go.
Administrator Ed Hoops,
Present.
Staff Member Kim Kavanaugh,
Present.
and Agent Brady Hill.
Present.
Welcome, Brady.
Thank you.
Welcome. Acting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and or Chapter 237 of the Code of Town of Barnstable, the Barnstable Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, June 10th, 2025 at 3 p.m. for the applications of New Rushy Mars Realty, LLC, Julie Solomon. His hearing is being recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government's Access Channel. The plans and applications are on file and may be reviewed by scheduling appointments by sending emails requests to Ed Hoops at 230 South Street, Hyannis. In accordance with the Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, please let the chair know if anyone is recording this hearing. Hearing none, this afternoon's hearing agenda is posted on the town's website. On the agenda next to each application is the amount owed to the Town of Barnstable for the cost of advertisement. Please send your checks to the Conservation Division at 230 South Street before the hearing. Remote participations. The Conservation Commission's public hearing will be held by remote participation as a result of an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed up by the governor on March 28, 2025, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Remote public access to this hearing shall be provided in the following manner. 1, the hearing will be televised by Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via Town of Barnstable's Government's Access Channel. 2, the real-time public comment can be addressed to the Conservation Commission utilizing the Zoom link 830-4935-5051 or use the toll-free phone number 888-475-4499 as shown on the agenda. 3rd, the public can also email the comments to edwin.hoops@town.barnstable.ma.us at least 8 hours prior to the hearing. Just as we are calling for the quorum listing, you heard about Brady. Brady is our newest agent, started last Friday, and he is a graduated from UVM. And welcome, Brady. I want to give you a chance to say a few words if you want.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for my introduction, Tom. Excited to be here. Still getting into it, getting into the swing of things, but excited to help it down. So.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
One other thing that happened last Thursday during the town council meeting, that the town council approved our next new agent positions in the next fiscal year. So sometime in October, we would have another new member of our staff. So that is an excellent news.
Yay!
Thank you for Jim from the planning for pushing for that, and the town manager and town council as well. We have one thing. For the certificate of compliance, Lynn Candela, SE3-5728. The homeowner's representative is not available, so they want to continue that into July 15th. One other thing I want to mention, that staking for any NOI is important as part of the checklist, and it should be done a week before the hearing date. And it is very important because the commissioner looking at those stakes and looking at what is being proposed on the site during the site visit. So if the staking is not done on a timely manner, the commission may denying the project from lack of information as a consideration, just for information. We have one revised plan, left Linden SE36177. This is to allow for view shed, maintenance of the view shed. Arlene?
Good afternoon. Arlene Wilson, AM Wilson Associates here for the Luddens. I'll share my screen, I hope. There we go.
Yep.
So the Luddens have proposed and actually have built their addition already, and their stairs are in. What they would like to do is to maintain the 4 little view sheds that sort of run between the existing trees along the lake shore. And those numbers are the same as what we've numbered here. So you can see the existing openings. They'll probably be limited to very occasional pruning of a limb here or there. As you may remember, they are planting some understory vegetation along the top of the lake shore. Those materials have been selected to limit the necessity for topping or pruning of those shrubs. They're things that should not exceed 4 feet in height. And the view shed here is predominantly from that deck, which is pretty high up, why they want to maintain the view between the trees. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Arlene. Any question from the commissioner, Bill?
Yeah, on paper, it looks, I have no problem with it. I was thinking that, oh, this is a no-brainer. And yet the photograph that you just showed me, I'm like going, why would you need to trim? It almost looked like if you're maintaining 4 to 5 feet, minimum 4 to 5 feet, above grade, it looked like you had a good view already. Maybe you can just clarify that and just see.
Yeah, this isn't to do anything significant in the immediate future. It's so that they have the right to continue to keep those openings in the foreseeable future. So we would envision this as being a continuing condition on their certificate of compliance when it gets issued, Bill. Just so there won't be any confusion in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Luis?
What's the history of this view? Has it always been like this with a lot of open space between, really, these are relatively young trees, aren't they?
Some are younger than others, but the maples here have been here for probably more than 50 years. I think what happened as the pond shore was developed on Long Pond is that a great many of the houses had lawn right down to the edge. And so the openings like this are not unusual along the lake shore. I know it was like this when Mr. Ludden bought the property a couple of years ago.
Well, I look, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Prior to that, the prior owner had some history with the commission about cutting trees for his solar panels. And I believe the openings were pretty much there at that time.
Okay, well, what about the trees between what you have marked 3 and 4 and 3 and 2? Do you have, I mean, the thing is, I look at this and with the exception of the edges of the property, it looks like there's a huge percentage of view corridor openings, which is kind of unusual, other than, I guess, your situation where you want to be able to maintain what exists now. So I'm just wondering, were there trees there that have gone away, or what's the story?
Yep. There were, you can see on the plan, they look like little stumps. Those are the trees that were cut for the solar panels. Where there are some new trees that are going in and additional trees that are marked in green that were part of the mitigation for the addition. So there will be more trees on the property shortly than there have been for quite a while. And the trees along the pond shore are going to be maintained.
I see, thank you.
Angela?
Yes, thank you, Tom. So Arlene, I guess I'm trying to understand, as we move into the future, you're asking the commission, should there be new homeowners or whatever grows in, we want to be able to tell them, rather than clear cut all this because they want a view, there are specific corridors that they are allowed to keep open for a view, that they will not clear cut this regardless of who owns it and moving forward in the future. Is that what you're asking the commission?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then the understories keep between 4 to 6.
That's between 3 and 4. Right
says 4 to
along the new stuff that's being planted as part of the mitigation for the addition was selected to be not more than 4 feet so that it doesn't need to be pruned.
Okay.
Could I interject something?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Bill.
According to the request for plan revision, it says maintenance of shrubs 4 to 5 feet above grade. So
they're not going to grow more than that, Bill.
yeah, well, I get that, but 4 to 5 as opposed to 3 makes a difference. And I have one other question. In your little presentation at the beginning, did you say that there was mitigation plantings that would be done, or they are already done?
Some of them are done, some are not. The ones that are along the stairway have already been installed. Some of them along the pond shore are in, but they're not complete yet.
Okay.
We haven't asked for a certificate of compliance. I expect we'll be back with that within a month.
And so that's stuff that your cursor is on right now that's running along the waterfront, you know, will be growing up to 4 to 5 feet, right? I mean, that's the idea.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Tom,
Bill, yes?
essentially the yellow lines are proof that she's not going to clear cut the waterfront. The yellow scope lines.
The yellow scope line that is not clear cut, but under the understory is to let the understory to go
Yeah.
in 4 to 5.
Yeah, but her 4 yellow scopes here are basically the proof that she's not going to clear cut that front.
Right.
Front.
Did we answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I'm good with it.
Okay, good. Any other question from the commissioner? Let's try this. Could I have a motion to approve the revised plans as requested with the wheel corridor and then those understory to be kept between 4 to 5 feet?
So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Foster,
aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Kujulik,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
and Tangney, aye. That's 5, so it's unanimous.
Abstain.
And
Oh,
Pete
Pete.
just signed in. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Pete.
Welcome.
Welcome. We have one extension request, Town of Barnstable Conservation Divisions. This is for the sauna treatments. Ed,
Thank you,
this is
Mr.
the
Chairman.
request.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a third request for 3 years. This is to help continue with the sonar treatment that we are using currently in Long Pond and Middle Pond and Mystic. This has been ongoing treatment. We've been treating for hydrilla for over 10 years now, and again, this is for the continuation of that project.
Any question for Ed? Luis, your hand is still up.
Oh, I'm sorry. No question.
Okay,
I would make a comment, if you will,
sure.
and that is that I used to belong to the Indian Pond Association. I think I quit 2 or 3 years ago, and hydrilla was a big issue, and we wanted to have the sonar treatments. And there was some research done by me and others, and we found that a 10-year, just every year, blast it for 10 years, and you effectively starve the roots of hydrilla, because the problem with hydrilla is you pick it and it'll just spread. Whatever little fibers, they'll anchor and keep growing. And so the idea was to just continue to use the poison, the sonar. It's pumped into the water, and do it for 10 years. And there was some question on the part of the town council back, I want to say, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and we were concerned that we weren't going to get funding, and so we ended up, going to Mark Ells and whatnot and saying, well, you want 10 years, and there's a lot of data that says why you want to go 10 years. I believe they have not done 10 years, in contradiction to what Ed said, with all respect, but I think we're really close. I think we're really close to the 10-year, and I would think you would want to maybe stop, the 10-year consecutive thing after it's been done for 10 years. But I was thinking last year, and this is a little fuzzy in my head, I think we were like at year 8, but I don't think we hit 10. This could be year 10.
I'm sorry, that was my mistake. This will be 10 years at the end of the assuming you do this 3, it should be 10 years then.
And assuming that
so I misspoke.
And so I think after this, if they've done it 10 years in a row, I'd say year after we ought to say, time out, let's see what happens. So I think this should be a last year for it. That's because I was like the senior scientist working on hydrilla like 6 years ago or something. So that's just a FYI. But I think we're at the end. I would approve. I would approve it this year, and thereafter, we're done.
Right. Thank you, Bill, for the comment. Could I have a motion to approve the extension request?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Foster,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Koshulik,
Aye.
Lee, Sampu,
Aye.
Tangney. Aye. That's unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good luck, Ed. We have 2 NOI this afternoon. The first one is New Rushy Marsh Realty, LLC, proposed wetland expansions at existing horse paddock at 1541 Main Street, contoured as shown on the assessors map 017 parcel 007. Sean?
Yeah, I think
Mr. Chairman, Mike Ford, I'm going to start off just very briefly, if I could.
Yep, you can.
So thank you. Thank you. Mike Ford representing the applicant, along with Sean Reardon, who's really the project manager from Tetra Tech, and Ian Peach from Wilkinson, who will be doing the presentation. Mr. Chairman, I just kind of wanted to set the stage again procedurally where we are. The commission took a vote back in February 11th, to issue the formal enforcement order and set out a timeline of things that the applicant was required to do. The first of those was to get in the emergency or enforcement order response plan, which we had to get in by the end of February. We did, and the commission acted on that on March 4th and approved that conditionally. I say conditionally because it's all now contingent upon the commission being satisfied with issuing an order of conditions under this notice of intent, because all of this goes together. And the applicant is still committed to the enforcement order as it was originally envisioned, that being that both the work under that enforcement order response plan, which is really the replication work in the area where the violation occurred, has to be done and completed, and whatever you approve as an order of conditions has to be done and completed. And once this order of conditions is approved, and we anticipate and hope that you will approve it, then we will record. We've committed to record, even though it isn't customary, both the enforcement order, the enforcement order response plan, the order of conditions, and any plans associated with that. So all of it is at the registry and run with the title to the land. So we're still committed to that process, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
And
you.
with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Mike. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Mike. Yep. Again, this is Sean Reardon. I'm a engineer with Tetra Tech. We've been working with the landowner at Rushy Marsh Farm for probably going on 10, 15 years now. Really, really proud of the work that we've done out there. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of a miscommunication, which resulted in some wetland filling, which is why we're here. As Mike mentioned, we laid out an enforcement order response plan that restored the vegetation in the area of the impact, but also offset the BVW, proposed to offset the BVW loss and the lost flood storage by doing a wetland expansion on the opposite side of the pond where we had much better vegetation, much more positive impact. We filed the NOI in front of you right now last month. Took us a little bit longer than anticipated because we really had a lot of work to do just to answer some of the issues that were brought up during the course of the last hearings. I think Bill brought up the good comments about understanding the reference wetlands a lot better. Ed and Darcy certainly had expressed some concern about the viability of the restoration or the replication. And I think some of the other commissioners, including Pete, mentioned, if we're going to do something, let's do it. Let's do it right. Let's take advantage of this sort of unique opportunity and do the best we can with that. And I think what we've come back with does exactly that. Some of the things that we did as far as advancing the study, we continued with a program of monitoring our groundwater out there. We have 2 wells that are within the restoration area, the replication area, and we're monitoring water levels every 5 minutes. The goal being is from what I understand from our wetland scientists and from Ian is that wetlands are pretty much set by basically the average groundwater elevation during the growing season. So from March 1 to October 1, we want to really have a good understanding of what our average groundwater elevation is. We think we have that. We've adjusted it based on the drought conditions that we've experienced earlier in this year. We've adjusted it based on some other factors to make sure that we've got a really good understanding of that elevation so that we can now key all of our proposed excavation to that groundwater elevation. We also did a fair amount of work looking at the wetlands, and Ian will talk about that. And we also did some additional evaluation of our test pits to make sure that the soils that we were left behind or that we were going to be using were going to be used appropriately, and we're going to support the vegetation that we're proposing. So with that, I'd like to just turn it over to Ian to sort of remind people why we were so committed to this approach in the beginning and why we're even more committed to it now and more pleased with what we have now and our opportunity to do something really cool with what we've got.
All right. Thank you,
Yeah.
Sean. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mike, for the introduction. I'll share my screen briefly. That would be the best approach at the moment. All right. So good afternoon. Ian Peach, representing the project for Wilkinson Ecological Design. Wanted to just start here. These are all documents you have just to remind us of the site and its existing conditions with the paddock and the adjacent pitch pine oak woodland and the paddock and the adjacent wetland complex. So 2 photographs there. To try to simplify it, if that's possible, The overall goal is to expand the wetland ecosystem functions to replace what is now a horse paddock, basically a manicured lawn, with a wetland planting system designed really to greatly increase those native species biodiversity and also take a really hard look at some other ecosystem functions we could bring to this site. Some of those include a wider variety of insect food, host plants, soft mass, so those are berries, nesting sites, and a variety of cover for habitat, including downed wood, which I'll speak about, that's not currently being provided. We also thought very specifically about stratification, so varied structural diversity, as well as floral diversity. So to design the most appropriate wetland expansion in the project area, we really went back on site in great detail with boots on the ground. And you could generalize this wetland complex north of Main Street. But once you really get in there, these are the different plant communities, wetland plant communities that we found on site. So we mapped these and we came up, as you can see, the different ones. So you see areas, a lens of generally open water, changing and being encroached on over time, of course. Then you have your deep emergent marsh with a little bit of a hydrological connection running that way. And you have a shallow emergent marsh or a wet meadow, the two a little bit in flux. And these plant communities are based off of the NHESP established definitions for different wetland plant communities. And we included those in the filing as well. So this was our mapping to really try to understand what's this wetland complex, what are we working, and we really went in there not only assessing species we're finding, community scale mapping, but also specific elevations. So where do we want to site a little bit of a hummock? Where do we want to have things that are a little bit more depressed? And what sort of indicator species are we seeing that's going to give us the best chance of success with our wetland expansion area? So as you can see, you might not see that it's changed much, but if you look in the project area in that lower left, in a conceptual level, just carrying on the color coding, this is the logic we were bringing forward to then define in much more finer detail down to the exact elevation of plant species. And so you can see we're bringing in that aspect of a canopied wetland and the benefits that that brings in structural diversity and the ability to bring in unique species that exist adjacent and make that contiguous connection of corridor. We're able to carry across that shrub swamp plant community that has also a really wonderful niche there for soft mass, a lot of fruiting species, and cover and a connection to avian life. And then that emergent marsh, that wet meadow. So creating a diversity in our area, which is trying to be in some way a microcosm of the larger wetland complex adjacent to what we're working on. So just very briefly here, as you can see that follow-up section, it's really clear that one of our huge primary, very early on, we established this as a big time upside of this project, is to create that habitat connection. But we wanted to go much further than that and look specifically at different species, as I outlined, make sure we're really paying attention to indicator species and communities adjacent to us, indicator elevations, and bring that knowledge to our wetland. So we really went through and kind of mapped out the tree and shrub plant species and their eco-functions. And you can see that what you're seeing here are fruiting and blooming times across the season. And when we do this, we try to not only think about getting as much wildlife benefit and ecological functions, but also across the season, across that growing season, bringing as much fruiting or blooming benefits to pollinators and the species that use these plants as hosts or other parts in their life cycle. So that was important to our process. And you can find this on page 9 and 11 in the document. We also looked a little bit at our the seeds heads of grasses, which specifically have a special connection to avian life. So I wanted to share that or just highlight that as it was an important part of our thinking. In our ultimate planting design, as you see, we're doing 23 seeded native species. that will be across the wetland and have an important point in those interstitial spaces, as well as in that emergent marsh wet meadow area. We also are going to have over 134 shrubs and 10 trees. And really neat with those is that we're going to do a little micro tupelo grove proposed. And when we plant those, we're planting them at multiple different sizes, which is a nice strategy in ecological restoration to mimic how nature would regenerate that rhizonomous tupelo species, to have multi-sizes and set in motion something that not only looks more natural, but has an ability to function at those different ages and grow into a tupelo grove as it would exist in a more natural wetland. We also are plugging almost 1,000 almost 1,000 plugs, as well as gallons of these species. And I know last time there was a question about obligate, facultative, and where we're landing. We have everything, of course, builds down from that logic I spoke to in terms of, if I can move this back and forward. In terms of, in some way, mimicking and finding specific logic and targeted approach from what we found adjacent, but that also carries on to more than just, I mean, what am I trying to say here? We're taking that logic, but it goes down into other things we want to do. So what you see in these communities really neatly is you see a lot of dead wood, right? So just setting in an elevation and getting the soils to that right elevation and getting the topography designed was a part of it, and working with Sean and his team. But another part of it is we're bringing in dead wood to the site that will be laid down in strategic locations as outlined in both our plan and our narrative. And that brings in that necrosphere that we all know, that little ecological niche that brings that diverse community that thrives upon decaying wood. That's fungi, bacteria, invertebrates, salamanders. So we're having everything from the ground level to the botanic level, to the mid-story, to the canopy, to the overlay of elevations informing us in hydrology, and then really leveraging what we found adjacent on site to make the best possible wetland expansion for this about 7,400 square feet. So that's basically what we can get to look at the plan as well, if that's helpful. But I wanted to set the stage so you understood how we took our process to the next level, how we used the ecological restoration understood approach of really understanding the indicator communities and species that you're either trying to expand on or mimic in a way, for another word. And here's the plan that Sean showed up. And you can even see in plan view how we've built in different elevations and peninsulas where you'll have an island of tupelo, where you'll have dead wood, where you'll have space where the elevations will be lower and will be more herbaceous and lower shrubs. And you'll have ringed with a shrub swamp and more canopy community that connects with the existing adjacent communities. So we really feel that we've really refined this and taken this to the next level, that it will fit as appropriately as we can as wetland professionals with the data we have into the existing opportunity on this horse paddock.
Yeah, and as Ian mentioned, they really covered this really well, sort of, I consider, like, in the theoretical sense. And we as engineers need to put it on paper and make sure it's got the specificity and the exactness that we need to make sure everything works as well as intended. And what this plan shows is we've literally targeted every plant location. We've contoured the ground in expectation of the groundwater level that we've determined during the course of our study. We've identified about 7,400 square feet of wetland expansion or enhancement. That's the area outlined in green. And again, that's based on the targeted expected BVW based on our groundwater analysis. And then you can see that's where the connection to the upland area here, the wooded upland from the wetland happens. Changes it from what was about 20 feet, mostly on the slope of Main Street in this area, to about 100 feet now. That's basically an open wetland that's populated all the way through with suitable species. We've also got about 4,000 square feet of buffer zone planting. The thing I'm really pleased about, sort of how this made everything better, was that we originally had about 3,000 square feet of planting as mitigation for the Japanese pavilion. And Wilkinson was able to look at what we had proposed and really sort of tweak that plant list to suggest something that's far more suitable and a density that makes far more sense. And we in turn translated that into about 4,000 square feet of buffer zone planting. So, everything that we've done has led to a better place and led to more specificity that we hope the commission, finds suitable to join us in our work forward. Really quickly, as far as mitigation of risks during construction, this is a bit unique. We don't really anticipate much erosion risk because most of our excavation is going to be at or below the wetland level. So we're really going to be the low point. So traditionally, we don't have a lot of concern when we're digging holes as opposed to filling areas. Also, we have a very small area of temporary alteration where we connect our new wetland to the existing wetland, really to make sure that hydrologic connection is effective and everything is working as expected.
Thank you, Sean. Are you taking question now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Angela.
Yes, thank you, Tom. And there's a lot to unpack here, but before we even begin, I want to make sure I understand this. The NOI that you're presenting here is an expansion project. I was expecting a replication project, so I would like to know a simple answer of how we went from a 2,500 square foot replication to an expansion, 7,000 expansion project. It might be something I'm missing, and maybe there's a simple answer. Could you answer that?
Yes, because as part of this NOI, there was no wetland fill. So the wetland fill was a previous proposal, not a proposal, but a previous action. So as part of this description of this work, there was no fill taking place that we were offsetting. So it wasn't, in theory, a replication, if that explains it.
So you needed a larger area in order to do the replication, and is that what you're saying?
No, well, this notice of intent
Yes.
only covered what would have effectively been a portion of the restoration for the violation, which was part of the enforcement order. So the enforcement order and the restoration of that area was covered under the enforcement order. The enforcement order also required us to file a notice of intent
For this
to
area.
construct this wetland expansion. But this notice of intent doesn't include any wetland fill. So you can't really define it as a replication because the order itself doesn't include any fill.
Okay, so it's a wording issue. Okay, thank you. I'll let the other.
Yeah, and it's a scope definition issue. This notice of intent only covers a wetland expansion.
Right. The other piece is covered under the enforcement order.
Yeah, and this was something that actually Ed and Tom and I had met to discuss because it was a bit confusing when I first started compiling the NOI, how best to do it. And Ed and Tom were nice enough to sort of walk through it with me, and we figured out cooperatively what the best way to do it was.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Yep.
Did you just say Bill?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a concern, and before I kind of launch into my concern, I want to say that you guys have done a ton of work here, and I think the way you're approaching this is right. And I think you've been following. It's an orderly process, and I think it's well thought out. But I do have a concern, and that is that. To begin with, at the last meeting, I brought up the idea of a reference wetland and the importance of establishing what are we really trying to produce. And so you have done that, but you've described the reference wetland as sort of an amalgamation of deep emergent wetland, shallow emergent wetland, shrub, swamp, and forested wetland and wet meadow, which covers the spectrum. And from all of that, you down in the area where you're going to be doing this wetland expansion, you have three sections. And you have the shrub swamp and you have the forested wetland. And then you have something called the shallow emergent wetland / wet meadow. And there are there's essentially a definition of what a shallow emergent wetland is. And Wilkinson Ecological, brought that out. What the natural heritage, mass natural heritage, what is a shallow emergent wetland? And it's basically a shallow wetland that is inundated. It has surface water that's less than 6 inches deep for most of the growing season. And then a wet meadow doesn't have shallow surface water for most of the season. A shallow emergent wetland has, according to natural heritage, it has muskrat. It has frogs. I remember they were talking about bullfrogs, pickerel frogs. There was, I think, another frog species in there. But think wetland with frogs. You're talking open water. And so I think that your calculation of your target water elevation is really well done. I think your 2.78 looks good. And I won't go into how you calculated it. You know how you did it. I thought you guys did a great job. I mean, I can't find fault.
Yeah, it might be a little bit over exact, but that's the end.
Yeah, but there's like, okay, you were there. Well, it was kind of a wet, but then it's dry, blah, 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 and you end up at 278. I follow through all that, and I go, yeah, okay. So here we come to the point where you then provide on, I believe it's C201 of your plans. You have this grading plan. And the lowest elevation you have is 2.8. So you're not going below the groundwater level. You're basically excavating to the groundwater level. And now I understand that, there is a mixture of wet meadow and a mixture of shallow emergent, which is going to have, call it 3-4 inches of water, maybe 5, up to 6. You're going to have this frog habitat, we can call it, or you might have a muskrat swimming around in there. And it seems like you're not really creating, and let's face it, if you look at the reference wetland, you look at that map that you have there, I want to call it 50% is that light green stippled shallow emergent wetland / wet meadow, which is, by the way, now all invasive Phragmites that have totally screwed it up, and it's just this mess of invasive species. But if you're trying to create a shallow emergent wetland, I would think you would want to have substantial surface water, not really deep, but 4 or 5 inches depth. We talked about that the last time we met, and I remember Pete was saying, he goes, well, you can I can have some pools here and you can have some hummocks here or tussocks there, and, you can mix it up. And I noticed on your plan, you do indeed call for some, if you will, standing water in a few areas. But my concern, and here's kind of the bottom line, I'm thinking, if you're trying to truly create a fair amount of shallow emergent, how much are you really going to get of standing water, which is going to be pickerel, frogs, bullfrog habitat? Or is it just going to be a few isolated pools? And if a muskrat wanted to be there, you'd think you'd want a muskrat to be able to skinny around and go from here to there, sort of like a channel-y kind of a thing. And I don't see that. I just feel like you're going to have a few isolated, limited, we got 4 10-foot diameter holes because we got an excavator in, and we went around this hole and we dug a hole here, here, and here. Good enough. And everything else is then going to be de facto the wetland meadow, and you're not really creating a shallow emergent marsh. So you can respond to what I just said, but I wonder if it's not possible in some area to take a risk. And I'm not sure what the deal is with getting your excavators in the water, but going down below. Right now it's 2.8. I think I saw 2.8 as the lowest elevation. And can you go down to 2.5 and then diddle around and create a 50-foot hole that then somehow may connect to another 50-foot hole, and now you've got a truly shallow emergent marsh. Anyhow.
Yeah, and the short answer is absolutely right. But the time to do that is first, right? So that when we're digging down to that target elevation. But let me just explain a little bit of what our thought process was. Was we recognizing that our target groundwater elevation is the average during the growing season. To the extent that we're at it, that means that half of the growing season it's going to be underwater and half of the growing season it wouldn't be. As opposed to something that was wet all growing season. What you're describing is maybe a portion that's wet during the entirety of the...
Which is what? Excuse me, but that is the definition of a shallow emergent. If you look at the natural heritage pages that Wilkinson provided, it mentions specifically that a shallow emergent has surface water throughout the growing season. And so,
that could be, Bill, that could be my fault, right? Because I think in an engineer's terms, and I'm totaling on I'm thinking BVW versus land underwater, and I was trying to sort of not be land underwater but still be BVW. So you describe it perfectly. It's really just a matter of excavating another 3 to 5 inches of material, which in our mind is not a problem at all.
I want to jump up and down and go, yay, and hug you. It's like, whoa, that would be great. I mean, if you're open to that. And another comment is that the shrub swamp is supposedly, per definition, is going to provide vernal pool habitat. And it too is something that has surface water, quote, throughout most or all of the growing season. So, those are areas where, getting down in there and creating essentially water that's going to be, few inches deep, throughout the season is, and to do that would be like, wow, you did it, guys. I would salute you if you can do that.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear from Ian, because I take my keys from Ian. But from a construction standpoint, from a scope standpoint, as long as we're doing it as part of the initial excavation, it's really simple.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. Great comments. So we did a literature review, looked at some case studies to truly, and I should also say those plant community fact sheets are super helpful. We reference them all the time. It's a wonderful alignment in ecological restoration to shoot for. But as mapped shrub swamps, for example, all over, both meet and break some of those defined one sheet rules. Same with shallow emergent, same with wet meadow. It seemed like when I was researching wetland replication, creation, expansion, wetlands that were aiming, it seemed like wet meadow was a more achievable target than truly some of the specific tenets of shallow emergent. And I think that's why our design and the elevations were imagining a greater proportion of wet meadow with minor sort of micro, as you spoke to, smaller acts that were leaning towards the shallow emergent marsh complex. But just as Sean said, I would be open to that. In fact, I think I didn't bring it up before, we want to monitor this for 5 years. There has to be a little bit of adaptive management. We're going to learn a little bit. And I think we can take this as far and as thoughtfully as we can. And I would love to learn a little bit. If we play a little deeper with those elevations, can we meet some of those targets in terms of having a lens of water that's there through the growing season? So it's come from kind of research process, understanding. We also take this wetland complex and what we found there and how those communities are defined as much as possible into this realm, but there always is a translation. We are never going to be able to catch those communities that are in flux we're setting in motion our own set of constraints and things in a more anthropogenic way, and we're never going to be able to exactly get that shallow emergent. But if you feel like a primary goal should be to try to have a lens of water in there of some greater expanse in the right location, I don't see that. And again, I would work closely with Sean on the hydrology, but from at least right now, I don't see that as an issue in achieving the goals I was speaking to. Yeah, if anything, there's an upside to it for sure.
And really, sorry, Bill, but really all it would amount to is us drawing a 30 by 20 area and putting a lower contour elevation on it to make sure that we're digging a little bit deeper. And there's plenty of places that offer that.
Yeah, I mean, and I get that a wet meadow, is a good thing, but it's not a frog habitat. And maybe you'll never have muskrat there. Maybe you will, but I mean, the idea of having, and I'm making this up, like a third of that area that's green in there, if that ended up being excavated to, what is it, a 2.5 or something, assuming the 2.8 is real, or 2, or
what I want to do is look at the range of elevations in our data and see what the low elevation is and make sure that we're at least touching that. I would say we've got probably a little bit less area than a third of it available for those, maybe a quarter of it, because we've got a good portion of it that's dedicated to that Tupelo Grove, and that we've got a grade up and down to on the side. So I'd say maybe 30% is aggressive, but I would say somewhere in the order of 20 or 25%, yes.
And like the same goes to that shrub swamp area. The idea of having standing water, for a substantial amount of the growing season in some of the channels, if you will, that you'd want to have that there too.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Thank you very much, Pete.
Boy, do I enjoy all this science and ecological talk. Ian, I want to come.
Is that sarcasm or is that true?
No. Ian, I would love to come work with you. You sound like my colleagues when I was a college professor. Very impressed. And I know Dr. Hearn also has a extraordinary depth of thinking scientifically. I have just two thoughts. Again, one, I think it was just a fantastic presentation. I'm really excited about this. From a replication, the ability for humans to, and through engineering, through ecological understanding, to actually recreate the wetlands that essentially have been just decimated over the last 200 years. So I'm really psyched about this. The questions that I have, and Ian, I think I'm speaking to you, and I'm almost, I mean, you're sounding like a PhD, master's at the very least. But the question I have is, do you have any worry about the existing soil microbiome of your excavation areas that would require inoculation of wetland microorganisms? That's my first question. The second question I have is, in a wet forest, or essentially you're starting without any canopy much there. So you're going to get a lot of sunlight coming down to the ground, and you're going to have invasive species problems. And I want to make sure that at least for 5 years and maybe longer, there's going to have to be some very close managing to keep invasives such as Asiatic bittersweet, such as the Phragmites, from ruining, and I will say, yes, from ruining the ecosystems that you are presenting and hope to bring forward. Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I'll maybe do them backwards. The invasive plant management, or the active plant management, it's, as you know, because you've seen many of our projects, it's like what we are equipped to do. And I know Sean, leading this project, is a full believer that that's just as important as the visioning and the planting, is the maintenance, the monitoring, and at a, really kind of into perpetuity. That sounds like a strong word, but the pressures potentially in the seed bank, where there was a fence line, birds perching, etc. Edge condition, anthropogenic factors, all the species you talked about. It's critical that is part of this process and is fully considered, and will be something we will make sure we're continuing to keep a very close eye in our monitoring, and then recommending those full growing season visits to manage for that.
And I would add that in this particular case, it's really not a significant extension beyond what already happens on site. I mean, unlike most projects where you don't have people actively managing the landscape, we have 6 to 10 people that's their job, to manage the landscape. And this is just going to be another part of what they administer. I mean, if you've ever been out there, you can see the working gardens and the ornamental gardens. Yeah, they are meticulously maintained, and as this would be. And this is really in a high visibility area for the site. It's right at the end of the paddock area. That's got a couple sculptures in it, so it's not a place that's just going to be forgotten.
Cool. And now the other question, Ian.
The other one is really interesting. So we do that for different plantings. By that I mean when we plant like plugs, just to make it visual, we have a specific, basically inoculant. It's usually more trying to get some of the bacterial and fungal root promoting aspects into our plugs, so they actually get dipped before they planted. I would be very interested in that, in working with, now those are usually, they're wetland plantings sometimes, or wetland buffer plantings. I would probably do a little deeper research to see if there's something analogous that should be tweaked a little bit that would be even more applicable to the specific plant communities and goals of this project. So it is something that we do and recognize of a value in terms of restoring native plants and trying to establish plant communities in areas where there's huge legacies of soil disturbance, et cetera. I can't exactly say. Ideally, I'll be able to say, yeah, we've worked with this before, and we found that, you know, this inoculant or this root dip can be brought into our whole planting protocol, and we would have that from the get-go in terms of bringing things to the soil that are going to be helpful for the microorganisms and for, you know, setting in motion things that are going to help the whole system thrive.
You might also think about the source of some of your dead wood.
Totally. Yes.
To help you with this.
And I think that's well said. That's why we want, I forget what percentage we said of dead wood. I mean, we have it on the plan, but a certain percentage of the area, we want to bring in that dead wood. And truthfully, to me, that dead wood is like 3 plants. We're always thinking, oh, plants that are flowering and blooming. Like, I see that dead wood as doing as much, or truthfully more, to that project site than those 3 blueberries. And so it's critical that the dead wood is part of this project. Absolutely.
Excellent. I'm really psyched for this. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Could I ask, before we move on, could I ask a quick question in line with what Bill was suggesting? So we have a plan right now where we're over excavating a foot below the grades that you see on the plans in order to install a 1-foot layer of suitable soil. Do you still require that soil material if we're creating that sort of submerged condition? Because it may be as simple as we do the excavation, we just don't fill back that 1 foot, Bill, and we've gotten the areas that you've described.
I personally would think that the research that Ian could do on that, I don't think you necessarily need to be putting a foot everywhere. Right. When I say inoculate, I mean, you know, I'm not meaning, you know, 4 cubic yards of soil that you've got inoculate. I'm just meaning you need to bring some of this in so that you can reasonably quickly transition to the habitats that you are hoping to bring forth.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete. And Sean, I think that's actually maybe the first and easiest logic there. I think look at the data, like you said, and see what is our lowest range. But because we were over excavating and then bringing back, both in trying to support the different plants and communities in their different areas, I think we could just be more thoughtful in where that goes. And that maybe create that area. at least as a start. I think that's a reasonable approach.
Thank you. I'll come back to this one. Luis?
Let's see, earlier on, you were talking about matching up the features of the developing part with the existing part so that the newly developed area merges more naturally with what is already there. And I presume this is a way of making the transition to the new area smoother. It's in a way getting the existing area to support the new area. So, and that makes a lot of sense. However, if you look at the northern border that interfaces with the paddock, that's a relatively narrow border. Can you put your plan back up on the screen?
Yep.
That's a narrower area along that northern border, and it's relatively narrow.
Louise, are you seeing the plan right now?
Yep.
Yes.
It's relatively narrow compared to what you have approaching the existing area. And I see that as a pretty vulnerable spot because it's exposed to the ecosystem that you're transitioning away from. And I don't know, are you going to have animals out there, for example?
No. If I could just explain sort of our logic here. So this is a paddock area used really for short-term horses. The landowner has a suite of very nice horses that travel sometimes with them. And so this is really a temporary use paddock, but it's not for livestock or anything like that.
Well, I wouldn't think you would want to have any animals in there at all because you're dealing with a pretty delicate situation to begin with until things stabilize and age in. And
yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that the animals would be in the wetland. What I'm referring to, the animals that would be using the paddock that remains.
Yeah, and I'm saying that kind of disturbance is right at the border of your newly developed area, which is going to be very fragile, I would think, to begin with, because you are still going to be fighting off the, I guess, the residuals that you may not have fully taken account of. So I think, you're going to be in a pretty critical phase to begin with, and you wouldn't want anything there to disturb it, like animals, even once in a while. So, I'm wondering if you're doing anything special to protect that border, because I think you're exposing your new system to influences that you'd rather not have. And in fact, if you look further to the east, that little narrow border becomes wider and wider, and I think that's good because it's kind of a transition area, right, between the wetland and the existing paddock. But the narrowness of that border area that is directly north kind of worries me a bit, unless you protect it some other way.
Well, our thought process there was we were creating something we hope is very special, and we wanted to be able to have a way to interact with it. So we didn't want to make this overly thick because it would just cut off sort of our ability to interact. We did pull the paddock fence back about 12 feet so that we have an area between the paddock and the wetland vegetation. It's more of a maintenance path or or a place where if a horse does need to get by the outside of the paddock, that they have a way of doing it without having to go through the wetland. So yeah, we did think about that. The reason it is so thin is because we did want to engage. We wanted to engage with the space that we were creating, in particular the Tupelo Grove, because from everything I hear, that can be a pretty extraordinary thing to look at during the fall. That was our thought process.
Well, if you didn't have it, you know, what if you had it a little wider with, you know, God forbid, a path to get farther into the created wetland?
Yeah, I think we could absolutely thicken it up on both sides. I don't see why we couldn't reduce that clear area outside the fence by maybe 3 or 4 feet. So give a little bit more width on that side, and then maybe, to your point, extend it a little bit down the slope into the wet area. Absolutely, and I'll defer to Ian on that.
Yeah, I think it's important to ask these questions, and you know what are the adjacent forces that might interact with these goals. Like Sean said, I think it's important in these natural, like one goal is to have it be viewed from a couple sight lines. When people see things succeed, you know, it's kind of cues to care. It's like, hey, this is a created natural system, but it also, you know, I can see it. It's not hidden away. So we were trying to balance that. It's really not going to be what you're seeing there. That buffer is where topographically it will go up. And that's where you'll have certain plants that are more suited for that buffer. But it's not going to be necessarily some weak point. I think graphically in plan, it looks thin. But you know, in terms of just because we're down in the wetland or the created wetland or the wetland expansion or the BVW as it's shown here in green, it doesn't mean you're all of a sudden in this more expansive or more extensively fragile zone. Yeah, early on it's fragile, but the buffer would be fragile reasonably early on if a horse traipsed through there. I think it's just kind of, I just don't know how much a couple feet of making the upland buffer thicker really protects the concerns of the wetland. And I really, you know, that would be my feeling. I think, you know, there could be a push and pull if that felt just almost gut check, like that should be thicker. But of course, we're also trying to maximize actual wetland space. So it was just kind of in balance of that with that.
Yeah, it just seems to me that everything is going to be very fragile to begin with. And if you have even a few horses with droppings, that suddenly, you know, that diffuses down into your new area. It seems like it could really disrupt what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I can see that.
And if it allays any of your concerns, I mean, literally, I think at most there's maybe 3 horses here, maybe 3-4 weeks out of the year.
I was going to say something like that. Yeah. It's a very extreme minimal use if you're a horse paddock. In terms of stalking rates, potential for nitrogen, it's on the minimum side of that scale in terms of understanding the impacts.
Yeah, I'm expressing my concern. You people are the experts. And so I just mention it for you to think about, but it's up to you how you want to do it. So thanks a lot for listening.
Yeah.
Please. So I think it's my turn now. I think I saw Bill's hands up, but I want to mention my comments before I forget. I have a couple of things here. Number one, kind of interesting to listen to Bill's discussions about, you know, whether you need at least 3-4 inches of water in the emerging area and stuff like that. So that kind of interesting, that triggered me in terms of thinking about your modeling, because right now you're based on the current drought status to come up with that 2.78 level. But that is the current drought. I mean, right now, if you look at the rain in the coming weeks, that means the groundwater may be higher, which is good for you, right? But what happened next year when you have a severe drought to level 3, the level would drop and you don't have water. So to me, I think this is a kind of like adaptive adjustment stuff, depending on what you want to do in terms of the goal for a few years, because you need to look monitoring for 5 years or 6 years after. That would change in terms of the water level. That's only my thinking about, groundwater modeling is one thing. The reality on the water level, the groundwater level is another. So that's something that, is very difficult trying to predict. That's my comment. Second, when you mentioned about the constructions, how long is that construction period? And I know that Ian mentioned about 5-year monitoring. So the monitoring would start after the constructions. Am I right?
Yep, we're hoping, our hope is to get this work done, both the work of the restoration and this work done this year, so that our monitoring period would begin spring 2026.
Okay. One of the thought that I have is because usually our condition is like all the conditions like 3 years. And so it will go into the the second request in terms of the extension to the second order. I'm thinking about 6-year monitoring. If the construction period is so short, I'd rather go for 6. That's one thinking. Ed, do you have any?
Tom, as we've got it described right now, it would be 5 years from the initial start. So it would be 5 years from beginning the spring of 2026. So through 2031.
Okay, good. Ed, do you have any comment before I go back to Bill?
Yes. I don't disagree with a lot of it. And you all know my opinion on all of this, so I'm not going to rehash that. But I really hope, because this is a great plan. On paper, it looks great. I hope you can achieve what you are proposing, because if you do, it is going to be spectacular. And I'm hoping in 10 years' time, I will not be on the commission with the commission at that point. But I certainly hope I can come back and look at it and say I'm impressed. So with that, I'm hoping everything's going to go. I agree with you, Tom, as it relates to the idea of this should be like a midpoint that may have to get adjusted. But given the relatively quick proposal for construction, I would agree. I think 6 years. I was originally thinking maybe 10, but if it's going to be this quick, I think maybe 6 years. I think that would be the very minimum that I would suggest in terms of monitoring reports. I really do hope this comes to fruition just as it is on the plan. My other concern was I don't remember who brought it up, but the downed wood I think is a great addition. Just do you have any idea where you might be sourcing that from at this point? Would be my only concern with that, but.
In all likelihood, Ed, it would be from the property.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to suggest. If you could do it as local as possible.
Yep. We've actually set aside a few small trees that we pulled out for the firewood shelter, but they were kind of uninspiring. So, but we would ideally be sourcing it from the woodland in the site.
Okay. So I really hope this comes to fruition. Even if I would suspect that it's probably going to turn more into wet meadow, which I think is still great. It all has its benefit there. So I'm cautiously optimistic with this, and I wish you luck with it all. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ed. Bill.
Okay, I've got 3 questions, one to Pete, one to Ed, and one to Ian. Pete, do you, if you will, endorse my plan to have them lower their elevation for their excavation so that you end up having a greater amount of shallow emergent? We were talking about taking it down.
Yeah, I think that is a good plan to diversify elevation there, Bill.
Okay, and
Completely
so
support it.
Sean was talking 25%, and I think, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
we're talking about the green marked area that says shallow
yeah.
emergent. So
Get some frog habitat in there.
Understood.
right, and 25% that of that, and so I would think you would want to have. I don't know how we deal with this. This would be a question for Tom. A new plan that shows excavation down a little bit farther. And so then the question then goes to Ed. Ed is, hesitant. And I heard him say, as it is currently designed. And I'm thinking, Ed, you endorse, you're good with the idea of trying to take it down a little farther, have more emergent wetland. I actually think if you're going to have an emergent wetland, you want to have some standing water. And as it's currently designed, I think you're going to end up having almost all wet meadow with a couple of pockets. And so you're good with what I have been suggesting, right, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you're looking to do, I'm not going to say I don't agree with it.
Okay.
I just
okay. So I think
I've got Bill. I've got a little bit of input. Don't worry about the muskrat.
I'm not worried about the muskrat, but I'm thinking frogs and standing water and virgin marsh by definition.
Right.
Let's do it, right? And
Yes.
if Sean thinks let's take out another 3 inches, fine. So then my other question.
Let me continue on with the muskrat. I don't think you need to worry about a connection to the larger open water, which would again be more muskrat habitat. I think isolated pools make it more protected for amphibians. And I'm going to really shout out for vernal pool kind of amphibians, not bullfrogs.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I don't want the muskrat channel going to the bigger pond.
Okay, so we're good. We want to take it down, and that's good. And so then, my question is that in that discussion with Pete, Ian, we're talking about putting a layer of fill, and the layer of fill was about 1 foot. And I got a little confused hearing that, because my impression was that on C201, which shows the excavation, 2.8 was the lowest elevation. And I think I was hearing that Sean said, well, we can do 2.5 because that's the initial, let's get the excavators out there and just, bring down the land, and we'll be in some standing water maybe. But then was the plan to then take and put 1 foot of fill on top of what is currently 2.8?
No, I don't think that's what you want to do.
No, because then you're at 3.8 and the edge of the wetland is at 3.5.
No, absolutely not. No, Bill, what I was referring to is the grades that you see referenced on the plan are the finished grades. So, the end result. But my point is that in order to achieve these finished grades, when we dig down, we would have dug through the usable topsoil.
Right.
So we need to dig down even a little bit further than our proposed finished grades so that we can provide a suitable layer of topsoil for a growing matrix for the plant.
So okay, and so I'm just wondering, this is over. I don't know the answer to this. If you ended up having, you dig it out, you haven't put the dirt down, the foot of fill of whatever, and now you've got, call it, 7 or 8 inches of water. Why would we need to put fill in that water to create the base of that? Would not there be basically runoff of mud, dirt, what have you, that would then essentially line that? So that you would then be able to obtain, 5 inches of water, because you're not putting the fill in the water, right? I mean,
right. That's kind of what I tried to describe earlier, but I guess I didn't do a very good job of it. But yeah, to your point, it's like we're already digging down. If we just don't put a full foot back,
Yeah,
well, whatever we have less than a foot is additional water that we'll
Or-
have exposed.
right. Or even don't put anything in. I mean, I don't know. Would it be bad not to put anything in? Because I feel like, you know, a marsh that it's, you know, if you're putting sedges and whatnot, eventually it's just going to grow,
Yeah.
right? I mean, who needs to put the dirt in the standing water? I mean,
I
Is
think
that-
we've got a really good understanding of what changes we need to make. I don't expect them to substantially change the plans. So,
right.
you know, we could be back with revised plans in less than a week. Or even we could, if the commission was comfortable, we could defer a final plan for review by Ed later in recognizing that this is 99% of the scope that we've got to capture. But I'll leave it up to you guys. It's not a heavy lift either way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like, you know, a quarter of that green area that's now down around
Yep.
2.5, 2.4, or whatever, you know, that. Okay, thank you.
Luis.
With all due respect, I think these folks have studied this, you know, the potential for what they're going to do and why extensively. And I think, you know, our comments should be taken as suggestions. It's not appropriate for us to be redesigning that
Yeah.
they thought so hard about and understand so much more than even we do. So,
Excellent comment, Louise.
And we don't take it that way. This is more of a collaboration and people
right.
getting good ideas, which
Yeah.
we wouldn't do anything we didn't support.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing what you come up with in the next few weeks.
So one last thing, Angela.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, though I do agree with what Bill brought up with the shallow margin. If it's going to say that and be defined as that, I do agree just going down a little more to 2.5 and put it in the plan in writing. I do not want to agree to a plan when we made 3 or 4 changes to it and then they're not ever showing up in print. That's all. I do agree with what Bill brought up, but I also agree with what Luke said. We defer to the professionals, but they're approving this through us in order to try this very delicate, risky thing that we now have to monitor for a few years. So this is the time to put input. And I do appreciate with them listening to us and giving the time that they gave it. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me go to channel 18. Any public comment on this one?
Seeing none.
None? So Sean and Ed, I'm thinking of the couple of things in here in terms of the conditions. Number one is I know this construction period is going to be short and this going to be this year. And because of the magnitude of the construction's activity on site, I want to get a construction's report, not every month, but every 2 months or maybe 3 months, and said, okay, this construction started and finished. So we have a track record of how the construction is going to start and finish, and is it completed, done, and then start the end monitoring period for 6 years.
Okay.
Is something's doable?
Sure.
Yeah, I would highly recommend check-ins at various points along the construction process.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mike Ford, perhaps
Yes.
we could provide you with a construction protocol with those events built into it and get that to you before we start.
okay. So let's do this one. Could I have a motions to approve this project subject to receipt of a revised plan showing what we discussed about those low points of less of about 2.5 or something to get a few inches of water in there. And then second, I need a construction protocol, as Mike suggested, as part of the revised plan submittal. And I need a construction report for the status of that construction period, and then a monitoring for 6 years, starting
So
after.
moved.
Second.
Do you, Tom, before you finish that, do you want ongoing invasives treatment with this as well?
Yes, I think
Which I would suggest.
Thanks, Ed.
and the ongoing condition as the invasive control.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Foster,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Koshulik,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Tangney, aye. That's unanimous.
Good luck,
Thank you,
Mike.
everybody.
John, and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The second NOI is Julie Solomon. Demolish existing residential superstructures and premises, cap foundations and construct new superstructures and premises, landscaping and mitigations at 247 Nine Neck Road as shown in the Assessors Map 232, parcel 077. Arlene?
Good afternoon. Arlene Wilson, AM Wilson Associates, here for Ms. Solomon and Mr. Alpern, who own this jointly. I apologize for not having a better breadcrumb trail for you to follow to get into this lot. I know it's a little difficult to find, but this is a half acre, a little better than a half acre lot that's part of a family compound where the owners own several contiguous lots, or the family owns several contiguous lots, which is why no one has ever worried too much about whose lot you access over and whose lot you park on and those kinds of things. So the property currently contains a 3-bedroom home and down near the water, a 2-bedroom guest house. The owners applied for an order of conditions in 2022 and received a permit which would have resulted in the complete demolition of the existing 3-bedroom home and the construction of a new home, which was a little further back on the lot and more parallel to the pond shore. It also had a bigger footprint and skinnier buffer down near the water. If the commission approves the current design, then the older one will be abandoned and will apply for a certificate of compliance with no work having been done. So the current proposal is to reuse the existing foundation, which will result in somewhat less disturbance across the site in general. The existing foundation, the superstructure would be demolished. The foundation would be reinforced on the inside and capped so that the foundation wall would provide enough height to meet current building code requirements for headroom, as some of the basement space would propose to be finished. There are also 2 small infill additions, one at the north corner to square off the house in that location, and one on the southeast section of the existing facade where the current access to the house is. The superstructure.
Arlene, do you mind to share the plan?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's try that. So the 2 darker areas are the infill that we're talking about. The superstructure of the house would be rebuilt as 2 stories, but there would continue to be only 3 bedrooms. The design proposes to actually create a front door for this house. So on the north side of the house would be the main entry. There'd be a new walkway which would access it. And so we propose to regrade some of this area and provide a retaining wall so that there would be a little bit of a yard space and aesthetically a sense of arrival at the house, which you really don't have now. A portion of the existing deck would be provided with a roof to make it porch-like, and the remainder would be rebuilt as an open deck as it is now. There would be a walkout provided from the basement level on the south side in this area. Again, there would be a little piece of retainage provided on this side. It's so that we don't need to regrade, and hopefully so that we don't lose the tree that's over here. The purpose of this would be to allow for storage of lawn furniture and the owner's kayaks and that sort of thing in a portion of the basement. There isn't enough space headroom-wise to do that now, nor is there enough access to do it. There will be a need to take down all of the overgrown foundation plantings around the existing house. And unfortunately, 3 large trees on the north side of the house, which are within a couple of feet of the building now. I suspect even if nothing got done at this site, someone would approach you soon to take those trees down because they're a hazard. We will be replanting with other trees, probably in this area, so that there won't be a loss of overstory habitat. This project requires 1,431 square feet of mitigation. That mitigation is proposed to be required in this area. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. So for those of you who are down there, you know there's a hedge of arborvitae in this area. Now we will be taking that down, eliminating the section of the garden that belongs to the northerly lot, which is over the lot line now, and creating a better pond edge buffer, starting with higher woody shrubs close to the existing BVW, and with plantings that reduce in height as they approach the lawn edge. Roof runoff will be in dry wells or drip trenches. And although the demarcation for the mitigation isn't shown on this, we would propose that you will be getting an actual planting plan prior to the installation, and the demarcation will show on that plan will likely be rocks or bollards. And I would be happy to try and answer questions that the commission might have.
Thank you, Arlene. A couple of things in here. Number one is I think we need the demarcations on the mitigation planting area so that it's kind of separated out. And secondly, you mentioned about the dry well. We usually require that under the engineering plan, if you can show it. A couple of dry well that you needed for this projects. Question from the commissioner.
I would just make a comment that I second what you, Tom, when you said that you should have a plan that shows the bollards or rocks or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that should be on the plan, but otherwise I think I'm good with this.
Okay. Angela.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Arlene, for at least putting the map in, because I was one of the ones that I went last Thursday before all this rain, and thank the neighbors at least understood. A lady who opened up the window, I was at 261 and pointed me in the right direction. So I did find it, and it was marked when I got there, but not the trees you were taking down. So my question actually is, In that mitigation area, you're taking down trees or replacing trees? I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure. And I think you said you had to come back with the mitigation plan. What's going on there next to that guest house?
Next to the guest house apparently has permits for maintenance. So they've done a lot of work on the inside of that recently, and they were reconstructing the entry deck along here, which is probably what you saw.
Yeah, I saw guys working on the deck, and I understand the vegetation there. It's a lot is overgrown. You can't even see any water or anything neighbors from there. Is that where you're planning on the mitigation going?
This is a really interesting site. It was developed originally in the early 60s, and the actual view shed for this house is this way, across the abutters property, all family members. And I think that I have a picture that shows that here. So you can see the bulkhead from the existing building is back here, and the view shed is from that northerly corner, and this is actually the abutters property. So one of the reasons I think that they decided to try and keep the existing footprint was that the original proposal, you can see straighten the house out. This is the one they have the permit for. And the view now would have been through the forested area. They wouldn't have been able to see anything. So if they keep the existing footprint, then this corner of the house and the deck still maintains that view across the neighbor's lot. So we don't anticipate asking for another view corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question from the commissioner? I think one thing I'm at.
Oh, sorry. So I know you're planning on doing the demarcation, Arlene. So when you put that on the plan, a revised plan, it's just a little confusing because on the site plan you have that green area up where the garden and the arborvitae are as the I assume that's the mitigation area that you're referring to, where you're going to be putting the 1,400 square feet, correct?
Right in here.
The only thing is you have that mitigation. It says mitigation area off to the east of that, where you're. So it's a little confusing that it makes it seem like the mitigation area is closer to the house than where your cursor is now. So I could either put an arrow, just to put an arrow from that mitigation area where it says mitigation area on the plan.
Mm-hmm.
To the actual mitigation area, so or move it over somehow, just so you can see what I'm talking about.
I do.
Okay,
we'll clarify it and put some labeling on it.
That's all I'm asking.
The other things too, Arlene, if you're looking at the engineering plan versus the planting plan, the mitigation planting plan, if you look at the gas house, the planting plan for the gas house has that wooden deck. So that deck should be showing up on the engineering plan as well.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, we'll make sure that shows.
Yeah, it's minor, but it's important. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. So could I have a motion to approve this project subject to receipt of a revised plan showing the wooden deck on the engineering plans, the demarcations, and the dry wells? And ending report for 3 years.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Foster.
Aye.
Hearn.
Aye.
Kashulik.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Antagni, aye. That's unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good luck, Arlene.
Thank you.
We have one certificate of compliance and for SE 3-5728, Lynn Candela. The applicant's engineer is not available, so we are going to continue this to July 15th. And we have one set of minutes, May 27th.
I make a motion to accept the minutes for May 27th.
Second,
Roll call.
Foster,
aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Kashulik,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
and Tangney, aye. The minutes have been accepted.
Thank you. Hey, Pete, I just want to confirm before we close the meeting, are you retired by the end of this week?
Sort of, yes. Yeah, thank you for noticing. Yeah, I will not be teaching after Friday, although I have grades and I have a room to clean up after 15 years. But thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Pete.
More time for CONCOM.
Our next hearing is 6:30 on June the 24th. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Foster,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Kashulik,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
and Tangney, aye. That's unanimous, Mr. Chair. It's 4:40 p.m.